Thank you, Marta. And again, you did great transition. You've just used the most important word, foundation, which is where we're going to start. We're going to, we kind of put our heads together and talk with a lot of different teachers, and we've come up with just 5 tips or guidelines that we might help guide you as you think about integrating this stuff into your clinical work. And by coming back to these guidelines, or if they land for you, remembering to come back and kind of just review them, they might help to deal with difficulties or obstacles that have come up. So the first guideline we want to share with you is that we strongly encourage you to build a solid foundation. And the foundation is your own practice of mindfulness and self-compassion. Because your own practice is what enables you to build your self-compassion that you will be able to give to yourself at difficult moments with your clients, self-compassion that will enable you to build a compassionate presence and create compassionate relationship, create compassionate container. It's not the case that you will recycle your own practice and share that with your clients, however, right? Because what lands for you may not land for your clients. So it is also important, as someone who will share the practices, to experiment broadly and try different things. In order to facilitate that, Marta and I have created a checklist for you, which is one of the library items, if you like. If this is not right for you, then please don't think about it again. But this is basically a list. It's a long checklist of all of the practices in the MSc core curriculum. It includes the guided meditation practices, the daily and informal practices that can be integrated into the fabric of daily life. It includes the most useful topics, like the zones of tolerance, the 3 circles that we will be talking about in the coming videos. It also includes some of the updated practices, like the fierce self-compassion practices, like some Marta's becoming a compassionate mess practice. And you can use this as a way to track, have you tried this one? What did you experience? How many times have you tried it? If this is something that you might find useful as you're building your foundation, we offer this to you as a friendly support, because there is just so much stuff in the curriculum. Secondly, and this comes remembering that the MSc program is a resource building program that is open to anyone. It's not a form of therapy. We are adapting these tools and techniques for you to use in your clinical work, specifically therapeutically, but it's important to retain this common humanity resource building perspective. We are not offering these to people because people are broken or deficient or in some way disordered. Mindfulness and self-compassion are innate human resources that all humans possess. We all have the capacity for mindfulness built into our human brains. We all have the capacity for compassion built into our human hearts or brains, if you like. And they're like muscles. That muscle may be well-developed. It may be underdeveloped. It may be undeveloped. Marta's already outlined some of the conditions that research has shown lead to an underdeveloped self-compassion muscle, like, for example, neglect or abuse. However, the nature of every muscle is to grow when allowed to. And it is the same thing, even if someone has never used their bicep before for some reason, if they start to use it carefully and kindly, that bicep will develop. And mindfulness and self-compassion work in that way. So our goal is not that we are pushing something onto the client. We are helping the client to get in contact with something they already have. We want them to connect with it. We want them to gradually develop their capacity to use it. So it's because for me, at least, as a psychologist and the way that I was trained, this is a really different kind of perspective than how I was trained. I was trained to be a diagnostician and to spot disorders. I know that not every mental health professional is like that, and many have been trained in a strengths-based perspective, and I think that this will fit very well with that. But this is a common humanity and resource building perspective when we bring self-compassion into therapy. It's very useful to start to develop your self-compassion ears. A lot of the time that we sit with people, we're listening to them tell their story, what happened and what that was like for them. But we also want to, and we also want to start to develop beyond the details of the story, listening for how the client is responding to their own experience. How are they relating to their experience right here, right now, as they share it with us? So this is, many decades ago, the psychoanalyst Reich spoke about listening with the third ear. And in fact, in self-compassion, we're trying to develop a kind of third therapeutic ear, the self-compassion ear, listening how the client is responding to themselves. So what are the kind of things that we're going to listen for? Number one, we want to listen for what we call struggle. We embody this. It's this sense of no, I don't want to feel this. So not only am I feeling something, I don't want to feel it. Where self-compassion has a feeling, maybe you've heard Chris do this. It's wonderful when Chris does it. Where self-compassion has the feeling of we say, if it feels like a struggle, it's not self-compassion. And I also always remember a client, a British client, who was sitting with me. And this was, and I only realized this later, although I saw it through my CBT eyes when this happened 10 years ago. She presented for therapy in the wake of a breakup, and she herself had kind of defined herself through that relationship. And she was heartbroken, and she was in quite a bit of pain, and she was crying and crying. And in between crying, she kept saying, "It's not nice. It's not nice." And then at some stage I realized, I thought she was referring to the boyfriend, but then I realized actually it didn't, my understanding wasn't right. So I stopped at some point and eventually said to her, "Gosh, you're in so much pain, and you're really expressing something that feels important to you. When you say it's not nice, what do you mean?" And she said, "It's not nice to feel this way. I shouldn't feel this way." Right? And it went even deeper than that, to a sense of like, these feelings are wrong. Right? And that's, she was, so not only was she in terrible pain, she was struggling with that experience. Of course, self-criticism and self-blame, we know that they're just so widespread for so many of our clients, even culminating for some clients in self-hatred, starting to use our self-compassion ears to listen for these moments. The really important experience of stigma, this internalized experience of oppression, marginalization for people who have been devalued by the society or by the groups around them, and they internalize this experience of stigma, listening for that self-stigma so that we can start to highlight that and bring compassion to that internal self-devaluation, to that whole experience. And we'll spend some time talking about shame, because shame is such a powerful and painful experience. It involves the loss of the observing self. Of course, the general tendency for us to be up in our heads and to get into an intellectual place where we're just lost in our various thoughts and beliefs, and that can be a sign of suffering as well. When someone is up in intellectualization and rationalization and justification and just lost and disappearing, as Stephen Hayes says, into the story. The person vanishes into the story. And finally, as we'll discuss in videos 3 and 4, the difficult responses that can come up to self-compassion or therapist compassion, backdraft, and other kinds of fears of compassion, which can become terrible obstacles when we're bringing self-compassion into therapy. And in the 3rd and 4th videos, we'll talk about how you can respond to those moments. I'm going to go to another well-known psychoanalyst. Frieda Fromm-Reichmann is famous for having said decades ago, "The patient needs an experience, not an explanation." So when we practice self-compassion, the client needs to experience self-compassion directly. The client does not need self-compassion explained to them. So we frequently say we're learning self-compassion. We're not learning about self-compassion. These are skills that the client doesn't need to understand to develop them. I know that sounds strange, but a person can develop self-compassion even if we've never used the word self-compassion with them. They develop from skill practice. And the more the client practices, both over time and across different contexts, the more these muscles will develop. And as they develop, you learn what they can do for you, right? And that people are frequently surprised by what weeks and months and years of self-compassion practice will bring to them. These skills do not develop from talking about them. So we're going to talk about how once you're listening and you start to hear those entry points that I just mentioned a moment ago, when you're listening, you can immediately bring inquiry, which we're going to devote the entire video to talking about, bringing MSc inquiry into this process to immediately start to cultivate a self-compassionate response right in the therapy session. And finally, such a valuable principle that many of us have already brought into our therapy, but this sense that the client can be their own best teacher. They can guide themselves. So the client's direct experience is the primary teacher, not the therapist. What's it like when you practice soothing touch? What's it like when you do the self-compassion break? What would it be like if you spoke to yourself like a good, encouraging coach? What would it be like if you could whisper at a difficult moment in your own ear, I love you, keep going, or whatever it was that you needed to hear at that moment? How does that land? And being willing to try different things, because the client can learn through trial and error what their own needs are and different ways that they can meet those needs at different moments of their lives. This is developing self-compassion is a journey of learning how to listen to ourselves. So really, we're fundamentally trying to empower, to restore the authority of the client's direct experience. And we can do this, especially if we do it in a sensitive, compassionate relationship, where we don't necessarily foster the client's dependence. We don't necessarily foster their dependence on the therapist's guidance or the therapist's approval, but we really empower them to kind of listen to their own experience as it unfolds and notice what connects for them. Those are 5 things we'd like to share with you. And we will elaborate more on these as we go through the videos.